Good morning. Welcome to the Saturday edition of the NBA Betting Show. With us, as always, Mike Lockey. You know him from livepokercoaching.com. Matt Meiselman, fresh off his Friday night tweet storm that I'm sure we'll get into at some point. You know him from DraftKings show The Slate. You know him from his own podcast, Studying the Sharps. I am Mike G, and I am still reasonably interested in the soccer game, but I'll keep an eye on that while we jump straight into the action. Matt, I think we would have we want to talk Mavs or we want to talk Bucks first. Which game are we going to first?
Let's talk Bucks first because
Okay.
that's where like the biggest source of potential news value is, and it's a wild game. Like the setup for this game is wild, so I think we're gonna need a bit to talk about this one, but it's the game where we potentially could have by far the most edge on it.
All right, what do we got?
Okay, so the Bucks are playing the Hornets. I have the Bucks box score from last night up. But the Bucks are playing the Hornets tonight in Charlotte after losing at home to the suddenly not so awful Lakers. It's not that sudden. The Lakers are just below average team when they're healthy, and we're getting that version now.
Yeah, it's amazing what happens when a guy who's supposed to be in the top 10 actually starts playing like he's in the top 10. I'm not talking about LeBron. I'm talking
Davis,
about
for sure.
Davis, yeah. Because LeBron's top 50. Like LeBron's pretty good. Although he played really well last night. I just want to before we go to
it does show though. Even that team was terrible, but when you have two players who can play really well and at least one's top 10,
Right.
possibly top 5, it's a whole different ballgame. But
Yep.
So what are we looking at for today?
Okay, so with the Bucks losing last night, normally we want the team for the optimal rest advantage or for potential to get a rest spot for key players. We basically want the team to win a close game where the starters have to play big minutes. But the reason we want them to win it is because it gives them a little more incentive to take the foot off the gas. Like, we got to win last night. We can give Giannis a night off. Normally, I would say the fact that they lost the game hurts our case that we will get these guys not playing. But given where Milwaukee is in the standings and given like their expectations for the season, I really don't think they care much about their regular season record. Like, they're 15-6. They probably know that they don't have the best chance to finish ahead of Boston this year. They're going to be giving their guys more rest throughout the season than the Celtics are. Chris Middleton just came back off knee surgery. It was his first game of the year last night. Giannis is already
ruled out of this one, right?
What's that?
Middleton's already been ruled out of this one. Right?
Not ruled out, but they said after the game he's unlikely.
Okay.
So he's projected out. We haven't projected
Gotcha.
out. I guess he's technically doubtful, but
Okay.
he's not going to play. Yeah, he might as well have been ruled out
He's
already.
the easiest one, but
sure.
I think you have a great point. This is a clear-cut Giannis rest spot in theory, and I agree with you. And I think it would have been much more likely if they had won last night, but I'm still giving a pretty solid. I would be shocked if it's less than 60% that Giannis plays.
Yeah,
Or Giannis sits, I'm sorry.
right. I mean, I think he is more likely to sit than not. I'm not too worried about the fact that they didn't win. Like maybe it makes them a little less likely to rest.
I do agree with you. They still should be one of the best teams in the league. I do remember looking at the standings recently and being shocked at how much true parity there really was at the exact moment. Like how many of the teams were like really bunched in together. But that's, we're only 21 or so games in the season. That's going to pull apart eventually. But
yeah. Right. It's really just
Matt,
three teams who are well above the rest right now with Boston, Milwaukee, Cleveland. Basically, the point that we care about, though, is Milwaukee is not going to be in the play-in tournament. They don't have to worry about that. So I just don't think they care that much on a game-by-game basis.
Okay, so let's look at the sheet and see where the value is, or where the value could be, depending on how the news breaks.
I'll go there in 1 second, but just the last point on Milwaukee playing last night. The important thing here is the game was close. Giannis played 35 minutes. Brook Lopez played 32 minutes. Drew played 39. So for that reason,
it's a big load on Drew also.
And right. So I think he's especially important. Let's go over the sheet here.
I was gonna say, how big is Drew's impact on the game?
Okay, here we go.
Because Giannis is clearly massive, but I think Drew could be sneaky.
Yeah, they do. So it's a little bit different than it's been because we have guys like Pat Connaughton and George Hill healthy. So there were games earlier in the year where when Drew was out, we had a ton of Javon Carter minutes. We had like Marjon Beauchamp, I think that's how you say his name, playing big minutes. He probably will play tonight. He didn't play last night. I don't actually know how that's pronounced, but they had like G Leaguers playing big minutes. Now they've got, I mean, they could rest George Hill and Pat Connaughton too. I think, the other one is Grayson Allen was injured for a while, so having him there when Drew doesn't play, it looked a lot worse. Like Drew's impact was probably closer to 4.5 points in prior games. Right now I have him estimated at 3. I've Giannis estimated at 5. This is a bit of a mild version of, if you guys remember, that Luka rest situation where I was estimating him as a worse version of himself because he had just played such a taxing game. I've got that on Drew already. Like, I've already dinged him half a point because he played so much last night. I would imagine if he plays, he'll be a little bit fatigued. And then Giannis to a bit lesser of an extent. So normally Giannis and Drew would be worth like 9 or 10. I have them worth 8, which is still quite a lot.
Sure.
So these guys are very important. But, okay, so right now we have the Bucks projected as 8-point favorites. And the current betting line, I think everywhere has it at 6. So if there are no updates of any kind, we actually are showing slight value on Milwaukee. But I think Giannis has like a 1 in 3 chance to suit up. I think Drew Holiday is like a 1 in 3 chance to suit up. I think Brook Lopez might even be 50-50. He played 32 minutes last night. He was playing, not one-on-one, head-to-head with Anthony Davis. Like, it wasn't an easy game for him. And then we have guys like Connaughton and Allen, and I think Portis will play. So it's those 3. I think Giannis and Drew are very likely to rest. And should I pause for a second now? We have some bad sports going on.
Oh, great. Yep. Okay. Well, at least I don't need to divert my attention too much anymore. I was trying not to watch, but now I see it down too little. But anyway.
So the U.S. is down 2-0. Yeah.
Right. So
there's a soccer game going on?
Yeah, there is. We don't care, though.
Sorry.
Oh, hold on. We care.
I don't care.
Sorry. Yeah.
I care a little.
Doesn't care. Right.
I care enough that I switched rooms today so that I could have the TV back there, but maybe I'll switch back now.
All right. So for this game, we're showing value on the Bucks, but are you betting it now, or are you waiting to confirm who's in?
So I bet this is
you
the important.
You have the Hornets already, don't you?
Already have the Hornets, yeah.
Okay.
So this question of what are we doing? It's more relevant for this game than probably any other time you've asked it, because I've basically bet as much as I can on the Hornets at any site where I can get a cash out.
Okay.
Because the Giannis and Drew rest situation, and possibly Lopez and possibly other guys, it's not really priced into the line. So if you bet Hornets +6 at a site that will let you cash out for the full amount if the line stays there, and then these guys wind up playing, the books are not going to realize, like, it's no harm, no foul. The reason you don't want to get cash out happy.
The line will probably stay at 6 if they all play, right?
The line might go up to 7. Like, it's not going to move by that much. Yeah, like, it's not going to move by that much. You don't want to get cash out happy because it's a way to, like, trigger or tip off books that you're sharp and you're, like, constantly doing this. So I will try to.
But you don't want to ignore it either.
Right, because it's really useful.
Tool bag.
Yeah, it's a great tool. So I will try to save it for situations where if I use it, the books won't know that anything was ever up. And they don't know that we have Giannis and Drew projected closer to doubtful. They may have some kind of hunch that rest could happen, but betting the Hornets now and then cashing out later if Giannis or Drew wind up playing, not nearly as egregious as doing something like where you are betting a cash out right before the line moves, because that's like its own form of closing line value. And right. I think you can get tipped off. Like, that's a good way to tip yourself off that you're a bettor who knows something. So I try to reserve the cash out for situations where the line is not really going to change. There's only upside is where I want to use that. So I have all the bets in on Charlotte around +6, 6.5 on sites where I know I can just cash it out if it doesn't go my way. But if Giannis or Drew, if we get them either downgrade to questionable, they're not playing.
Yep,
in this particular context, no way. And if they get ruled out, basically at that point, I'm just going to try to get as much more in on Charlotte as possible. Like, this
Money
is
line, first half, whatever you can.
Yeah, whatever's available, all those alt lines and anything like that. Yeah.
If you get both these guys out, you get roughly a pick 'em, right?
Yeah,
obviously
so
Rozier is a small issue all on his own.
right,
But if you
this
get
game
both
is
these
pretty
guys out,
nuanced, but yes. Yeah, Rozier is not listed on the injury report either. That is another hunch that I have.
it's a piece that's worth keeping in mind, though. This is a random Rozier sit game somehow. I agree with you.
Yeah, so the players I think who have an over 50% chance to be out for this game are Chris Middleton, but we already have him not projected in here. Giannis and Drew, and then Rozier, who just played 41 minutes last night in a win for the tanking Hornets. Like I think he's over 50% to just get a rest game, or like they make up some injury and say he's out. So
Right.
if all three of those players don't play, we have the fair line at something like Milwaukee -2.5, maybe -3, somewhere in that range. So having Charlotte at +6 is still good, but like I may not be adding much more at that point. That's like a
Right.
1 to 1.5 unit bet. It's not
And
crazy.
that's also going to be tough with the way the news comes in, because you're not going to get all three of those at the exact same time. They're going to come in slightly staggered. You might get the Giannis and Drew together, but the Rozier is likely going to be on an island.
Oh, absolutely. So Giannis and Drew, I think, have to come together. Like if we get
Yeah.
one ruled out and we don't hear about the other one, we have to assume the other one's playing. Like because
I
rest
think,
is
yeah,
not.
if we get random Drew questionable and nothing about Giannis, I think it's going to be very safe to say Giannis is going to play and Drew's probably going to sit.
Yeah, totally agree. So my guess is we're going to get them both ruled out at the same time at some point between like 1 and 3 p.m. Eastern. Yeah, I think that's the most likely thing. But yes, if we get an update on one and not the other, then we have to assume the one that we haven't heard about is in. The Rozier thing, like, yeah, I have no idea if or when we'll get anything on him. If the Rozier update comes first, like if we get Rozier ruled out right now, what I would probably do, I mean, this becomes the thing I just
Add
mentioned.
on some +8s.
Right. So certainly rebetting Charlotte after it moves is a good
Absolutely.
strategy. But if let's say you're doing the thing I'm doing where you bet Charlotte +6, and then your goal is to cash it out if the bet's bad.
Right.
Like cashing out ahead of that Rozier update could that sort of has
Is that more triggering to the books?
Yeah.
Is that more obvious?
Right.
Is that like it's going to give you away a little bit too much, or a little bit more than other moves?
Yeah, I think I would do it anyway, but yes.
Understood.
So let's say you're just going to be around your computer all day and you're going to be fast enough to just react to whatever. In that case, you can do nothing right now. If Rozier gets ruled out, you still do nothing. And then later when the Hornets are like +8, 8.5, then if you get the Giannis and Drew update, you can just bet Charlotte
Fire
at the
the
bigger
missiles.
number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let me give you an extreme opposite side.
Okay.
Possible scenario. Let's say Rozier is confirmed out. Giannis and Drew are confirmed in. Are you cashing out your Charlotte bets and then betting Bucks?
I'll just switch this over because I think we're having an issue pulling in the odds. But I think that's going to be hard because we'd have to get them all at the same time for that to work. Like, yeah, it's difficult. I think if we found out right now Giannis will play, Drew will play, Lopez will play, I guess at that point I would bet Milwaukee. Yeah. And then if Rozier ends up ruled out after that, it's just a bonus. But the problem is if Rozier gets ruled out now, we still think Giannis and Drew are also going to get ruled out. So I don't want to bet Milwaukee at that point. The only way the Bucks make sense as a bet is if we know Giannis and Drew are in. So we need that
Rozier
first.
would have to get ruled out first, and then we would we just wait till starting lineups, because we're not going to get an update that they're going to play. We would just have to not get an update that they're not going to play, right?
I think because of what you just said, the scenario where we bet on Milwaukee is just off the table. Because they're not going to just come out and say they're not resting.
Right.
They're either going to say they're resting or they're going to give us nothing, and then we're going to hear about it after the Rozier thing.
Right. And one of the reasons I was raising this is in case anybody's looking at the sheet, because our value sheet is posted at preachingsense.com on most days. So since it's currently showing green for the Bucks, but we're not actually recommending to make that bet. That's why I just wanted to clarify. So this is odd situation. It's a pretty juicy one. It's interesting. A lot of moving parts, but
This is a Matt specialty. He's very aware of the likelihood of the rest here. We've talked about these very similar spots. You know, we get them once a week from some team, and it's a clear, very good spot. We would have liked them to win a close game last night, but as it laid, I'm sure they might have had this spot circled for Giannis rest months ago.
They might have.
right?
Although when I was watching the game last night, the Bucks had the ball down 3 with like 20 seconds left. I was like, overtime is that's the win. Just give us
Yeah.
overtime. Like if that game had gone to OT, it would have definitely increased the probability that we get rest.
I would have definitely bet the Hornets last night if the game had gone to OT.
Yeah, disappointing. And then Westbrook missed 2 free throws, and then they got another shot at it, and then they missed again. So yeah, we should have got OT, but we didn't. But whatever, we'll work with what we have. I still think they're not going to play.
got it.
So right
All
now,
right.
yeah, I think you can bet Charlotte now, or you can wait, or you can kind of average in, which is more of what I'm doing. Like 1 unit now, more later, something like that.
Got it.
And then
Okay.
you want, but I do think you want to bet, if you can, at a place where you'll be able to cash it out for full amount too, which is important. So that would be WinBet, that would be Bet365, that would be MGM Borgata. Those are the ones where if the line hasn't changed, you're going to be able to get a cash out for the full amount. Other sites you may be able to cash out, but you won't get. They'll ding you a few percentage points to like
90
get you.
cents on the dollar or something.
Yeah, something like that. So the other option, if you're at one of those, is you can just bet the other side of the game, and then you just lose the vig. That's a similar outcome as the reduced cash out price, though. What you probably want to use one of the books I'm suggesting and get your full cash out amount, or if you're available to do this today, you just wait.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah,
can't
or-
bet you can't bet
that's-
Milwaukee now. To that point, like that is the important
The
thing. You
absolutely
can't bet.
only time we can bet Milwaukee is if we get news that both Giannis and Drew are playing. I think that's the only scenario where we could bet Milwaukee. And if we do, I'm not even sure how much I like it, but
Right, it's not even that good of a bet. We're showing 2 points of value. The line is 6. So
yeah.
in a best case scenario, I guess you could get Giannis and Drew play and Rozier doesn't play, which I know is kind of what you were alluding to, Mike. But the odds that stacks up right in terms of the timing is just too low. But that could work out. It is possible. And then I have to mention him again though. Brook Lopez could also sit this game. So
What is his approximate impact?
he's like 2 points. So
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not negligible.
yeah, he's really good. I mean, he's the favorite for Defensive Player of the Year right now. And I don't know
Is
if
that
he.
true?
Yeah, he's the betting favorite for Defensive Player of the Year. He passed Giannis last week. I do think it's pretty justified. Like his defensive rating on 538 is a 2.3, which is it's around borderline top 5. Like he's a good defensive player. It's a higher rating on defense than Giannis has. I think you could make a case for other guys, but he's certainly really good defensively. He's a negative on offense, but overall he's a good player.
Right.
But he's especially important in a game where Giannis is out because now you have a compound effect of the team has neither rim protector, and Bobby Portis was going to play either way. But if you get both Lopez and Giannis not there, you're going to have Portis at center, but then you might see like a bunch of Serge Ibaka minutes, or do they bring Thanasis up from the G League and start? Like the team gets really bad without Brook in a context where you already are missing Giannis. If you had Giannis playing, Brook is worth like 1.5 to 2 points because they can just play Portis and Giannis together for a lot of the game. But if you're missing Giannis already, Brook's impact might be 3 points, if not a little higher, because now you're going into Serge Ibaka and Thanasis Antetokounmpo, and those guys are not good.
Compounding downgrades is not what you want to see.
Yeah. And well, you do want to see it if you're looking at
Well,
Charlotte.
it depends on which side you're betting, I suppose.
Yeah. So in the best case scenario for Charlotte, Rozier plays, Giannis, Drew, and Brook all sit. And in that scenario, we've got the projected line at Hornets -4 roughly. So you'd have value of like 10 points. And that becomes the biggest bet of the year pretty much. Like that'd be if we got all of that at the same time somehow, then I'd be trying to get to like 7 units on this game. The timing is going to make it so that doesn't totally work out, but if Giannis, Drew, and Brook are all sitting, regardless of Rozier, this becomes a massive bet on Charlotte. And I do think there's a chance that Brook sits because 30-plus minutes.
Is there any props you'd want to be looking at? Who's left to handle the ball?
They're not going to post them. So we're not going to get them because...
Not with that attitude, they're not.
Yeah, well... yeah, let's see. We'll do a quick scan. Let's see what we got.
I'm just trying to think of who would even handle the ball. Would it be
it's going to be a lot
and Allen?
Javon Carter, Grayson Allen, Bobby Portis would be your clear targets for guys. Yeah, there's not even a section for player props for either team because I mean it's been a thing. This is not just FanDuel. Like I mean I can check DraftKings, but it's going to be more of the same.
I don't think they're going to be up at 11 a.m. on a Saturday. I do think that there's a chance they'll be posted by 1:30 if we haven't gotten news yet.
Okay, well Charlotte does have player props posted. It's a 6 p.m. game, so we will get some stuff if we're going to get it a little earlier than normal. Mm-hmm. The Charlotte stuff is interesting. Like, I mean, Kelly Oubre at over 19.5 points. If we think Rozier might not play, that's semi-interesting, but it doesn't even come close to the value we get.
If Rozier's out, that Oubre line is very spicy.
I think it's good, but it doesn't even touch what we'd get on like Portis or Javon Carter or Grayson Allen in a scenario where like Giannis and Drew and Brook are all out. But right. Yeah, I do like the Oubre line if Rozier doesn't play. And then Oubre also benefits from, the Bucks having a terrible defensive team tonight, which may be the case too. So I think you can get creative with this. Would I bet an Oubre over now? Maybe for a little bit. I wouldn't bet a lot. I think it'd be a tiny bet if anything. But
to me, it would be trying to get it in the portfolio in the last minute.
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it. I probably won't be leaving to go anywhere until we find out about this game because this is a potentially really big one with potentially a lot of bets. But to your point, yes, if we see some stuff pop up on Portis and Grayson Allen and Javon Carter, those I would actually bet even without having an update because I think there's enough of a probability for the Milwaukee
you have a lot of
guys.
Conviction here, and over time I've learned that I think your conviction's justified. Unless you've followed your ideology a long time, this could be a little intimidating for a new listener. But yeah, these props should be quite good as well.
Yeah, I think so.
The sheet's updated too, Matt, with the latest odds from.
I had a feeling that's what you were doing over there. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah, this is my intuition. No, we started like blinking a little bit. I was like, oh, the macro must be running. Okay,
it was mainly just to pull in the latest odds from Action Network. So
got it. Okay.
Up-to-date odds. I'm also just checking Bovada to see if they have anything for the on player props, just for grins here.
Yeah,
and it's just Charlotte. No Bucks guys on Bovada or Bet Online in Prop Builder.
Is there anything else you guys are thinking about this game before we move on? I know player props, but we got to wait, obviously.
No, I feel pretty complete with this game.
Because we could talk about this game for another hour. This game is kind of everything. This is
the Hornets owe me some money this year too, so I'm looking forward to cashing that in.
Yeah, the Hornets. And they've won now. I think 2 games in a row where we didn't bet on them, or we kind of bet, whatever. We had a lot of big Hornets bets that we lost, and now they've beaten Minnesota and Washington, and we've basically made nothing back from that.
It's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this will be the one. We're getting it all back in one shot.
There you go. Don't lose that.
Make it back in one trade. What could go wrong?
All right. I think we have talked plenty about the wonderful Charlotte Hornets and their opportunities today. Good value potentially, so keep an eye on things, everybody. What game you want to move to next? Anything else with opportunity today, Matt?
There's a lot. Let me think. Which one do we want to pick first? Let's do Clippers just because it is an earlier game, and it's news dependent, and we could get it while we're on here. And let's get ready for it before we get to the later ones. So we have Kawhi and Paul George both questionable, and I don't have a great feel for if or which of whatever, what combination of them we're going to see. I guess my best guess here, though, is we get 22 minutes of Kawhi and George is out. And just because like they went through the trouble of saying that if Kawhi plays, he'll be on a minutes limit, and we got no such update about George. And that's really all I have. So I'm like really speculating here, but that's my best guess. And the other reason I kind of think that that could be how it goes is because the current betting line makes perfect sense in light of Kawhi playing and George not playing. Like we have a projected line now of Clippers almost -5. And if you remove George only, you get it to about Clippers -1. And that's basically the line's 1.5. Like, I think it just adds up. So as far as what to do with this, I think there's two ways that are interesting to play this. If we get George ruled out and Kawhi in, there's no bet. But if we get both in, we have quite a bit of value on the Clippers. Like, it's more than a 1-unit bet.
If Paul plays, would you give him at least 90% of his normal minutes?
Yeah, I think so.
I think
they would have specified because they specified about Kawhi. Why wouldn't they specify about George?
Yeah, if we're getting anywhere close to most of Paul George's minutes, I think this is a slam on the Clippers.
Yep. And if George plays and Kawhi doesn't, the Clippers are still fine. George is worth more.
A much smaller bet, but probably get a little something in.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's right. So it's for two reasons. George is better than Kawhi right now. He's rated better, and a lot of that is because Kawhi is not his like fully normal self after so much time off. The other part of it is George plays more of the game, so his net value to the team is much higher because Kawhi is on a minutes limit whenever he plays. So George being in is more important for the Clippers than Kawhi right now. Later in the year it could change, but for right now, if just Kawhi were ruled out and George played, we'd have the projected line of Clippers like 3.5 point favorites. I think closer to 3. And at -1.5, it's nothing special, but I think that would be okay. But I do think that's the least likely scenario where George is in and Kawhi is out. I think it's much more likely to be the reverse. So if it's the reverse and just Kawhi is in, there's no bet here. Yeah. If both guys play, we have a really good bet on the Clippers. But if both are ruled out, which is certainly...
that's what I was going to go to next.
Yeah, it's certainly on the table because neither has played in a while.
I think it's probably 40% that they both miss.
If not higher. Like, it could be even more. So in that scenario, we're going to have the projected line at about Kings -1. And the Kings are +1.5. So you might look at that and say, yeah, it's a little bit of value, but it's nothing special. My hunch is that if that happens, though, the Kings are going to move to like -4. I think there's a lot of Kings bias still baked in here.
Yeah, I was going to ask if the bloom is off the rose. About a week and a half ago,
no way.
There was a lot of Kings love.
Yeah.
So you think there's still it's still lingering?
I think the love fest has died down a bit. But I think people will overreact to the injury news. It's a little weird for me to say this specifically about Kawhi and George, though, because the argument I've made about them is that they are undervalued. Like, they're so much more important to the Clippers than people realize because the rest of the team is bad. But with Norman Powell already being out, I think the reaction picks up, and Powell is like maybe the most overrated guy on the team. So the dynamic has shifted a bit where, like, I don't care at all that Powell's not playing. I'd rather see Robert Covington on the court. He's better. Like, he actually plays defense. Powell is whatever, but I think the public cares more about Norman Powell. So the dynamic here has shifted a bit. Mm-hmm. So what I would do probably if we get George and Kawhi ruled out is make like a 1 to 2 unit bet on the Kings at that moment if I can get it in. And then wait till the line shifts and then go for a middle or try to like arb it or something like that. I think you're going to be able to create a plus EV scenario. And it's not like the Kings would be a negative EV bet anyway. They just... Basically what I'm suggesting is betting more than you might otherwise bet. Because Kings plus 1.5 is still decent without George and Leonard. But it's not great. It's like a half unit to a unit value. We'd have an edge of like 2.5 points, 2.5 points. But because I think the line will move so much, I think you can over bet that and then bet some back the other way to like make your bet cheaper or to get a bit of a middle or something like that. I think the public will overreact to it.
Okay. All right, unless another Zubats 30-30 game, is that being factored into the model at all? Or
I'll have to check into the code and see if that's in there.
We're going to call that one the anomaly of anomalies. All right. Anything else on Clips Kings, or time to move to the next game?
I'm just going to do a quick prop check here and see if we have anything there, because again, these are important players. I'm guessing we don't. I don't have it on screen here for the screen share, but I'm just doing a quick scan on my own. It just looks like we have Sacramento props posted, nothing for the Clippers. So if that gets posted later, that could be something to look at. But as of now, yeah, I think that covers this game, unless you guys have something else.
I think that's it for that one. Where are we off to next? We talking Portland, Utah, or different game?
Let's go chronologically we'll get Portland, Utah. We'll do last. Let's do Minnesota.
Okay.
Okay. So we have SGA questionable again, and this one, I mean, this is a little bit triggering. This reminder of that Spurs game. The Spurs never do what we need them to do. They just, oh man. Okay. Well,
Pop gets what he wants.
Yeah, they're really good at tanking right now. They're really effective.
There's an article I saw the other day. They called it tanking with style.
Yes,
for the Spurs. So yeah, but all right. But what are we looking at? What are we looking at that we think is actionable for this game?
If SGA is out, there is a ton of value on Minnesota.
Okay.
So Karl Anthony Towns being out is a big deal for the Wolves, but first of all, he's not as good as people think.
Naz Reid's also reasonable, right?
I mean, he's negative, but he's competent.
Right.
Jaden McDaniels is also returning for this game, and he's probably closer to competent. Like, he's got a rating of negative half a point. But, like, Austin Rivers played big minutes for this team last game. Like, they are really thin, and having someone like Reed or McDaniels, those are net positive players on this Wolves team, because the guys behind them are so bad. So maybe on another team they wouldn't matter, but on this team where you're talking about playing like, I mean, it's Austin Rivers and Bryn Forbes, like, you can't have those guys on the court. So McDaniels coming back and being ahead of them is pretty important. Naz Reid being available to back up Gobert, also important, because they're missing Taurean Prince is also out. So Minnesota has their bench is still going to be bad, but it's less bad. And McDaniels being in the starting lineup will help. But Towns only has a player rating of 1.9. Like, he's good. His defense, I mean, as we've talked about, the defense with Towns on the court without Gobert is just horrible. Like, as a 5, Karl Anthony Towns is one of the worst defensive 5s in the NBA. He's not a starting caliber defender. He's really good offensively, but overall as a player, I mean, is he an all-star? I think he's close. Like, he's not nearly MVP tier. Like,
he's a guy I think is a little overrated. He's a guy that I'm not seeing as a good fit on this team or some others in particular.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, because the whole Minnesota theory was, well, he's not a good defensive 5, so let's bring in the best defensive 5.
Right. But then Towns still has to be in the game with him. So
yeah.
Yeah. Well, it hasn't work. So it's a tough spot, but it's an interesting team when you take either one of those guys off the floor.
Yeah.
So on this game, we're right now showing 2.5 points of value for Minnesota. Are you betting that now, or are you waiting till you get the SGA confirmation that he's out?
So the answer is yes, but it's obviously a lot better with that SGA. But the reason I brought up the whole thing with Towns and McDaniels is because we had to give a bit of a negative adjustment for Minnesota with Towns and Gobert together. I was doing that pretty regularly because that was clearly a team that was worse than the sum of its parts. Like, there aren't too many teams like that, but they were not fitting together well. We no longer have that issue. That issue is gone right now. The team is worse on like a player-by-player basis without Towns, but we don't have to give a negative adjustment anymore that the pieces don't fit. Like, Gobert has all the room to roam around the paint that he wants. It won't be clogged anymore. Everyone he's going to be playing with is going to be on the perimeter now. So I don't think he'll share the court with Naz Reid. It may be for like a minute or two, but that won't happen really. So We don't have to give all of that adds up to Towns just being not as big of a deal for the Wolves to not be there as people might think. Or maybe that's common knowledge. I don't know. But aside from that, we still have the Thunder being overrated, even after giving them a manual bump, which I've been doing throughout, the last 2 weeks because, and I mean, if anything, like I'm overreacting to SGA of having had a really hot start because he has not been quite as good recently. But whatever, we're giving the Thunder a bit of a manual bump. And even with that, with SGA in as it's projected, we have Minnesota favored by 8.5 on the projected line. And the current point spread is like 6 or 6.5. So right now it's a decent bet. I mean, I already got some in on this last night at a little bit lower of a number. But if SGA gets ruled out, this becomes like a 4 or 4.5 point edge. SGA is worth like 2 to 2.5. It's a little bit on the lower end of that right now because we'd be looking at like the backdoor cover garbage time scenario, like where this line would get pushed to without him. But let's say he's worth 2 points. That is being somewhat conservative. We have a fair line of Minnesota minus 10.5 if he doesn't play.
Got it.
And the current line is in the 6.5 range. So
fire the cannons.
For me, I'm kind of waiting. Like I already have a bit in at Minnesota minus 5. Because I have that, I'm not betting any more until we get him ruled out. If he's ruled out, I'll definitely bet more even at the bigger number. But
okay.
But for other people, I think this could be like a half unit now, and then even like 1.5 more units later. Like I think you could go some now, more later. But the later is the key because we don't have a ton here if SGA plays. And the other thing is if he plays, I think the line will fall. So if we get SGA ruled in, Minnesota may wind up only being minus 5, and then you just bet it when it bottoms out later. So you either want to bet as soon as possible if SGA is ruled out, or you want to bet as late as possible if he's ruled in. But it's a Minnesota bet either way.
Got it. Okay.
So we're kind of just playing the waiting game with that.
All right. I am not looking at the schedule of time. So what game is next in the chronological order for today?
Probably just Portland Jazz. The only
Portland
other
Jazz.
one you're interested, right? Anything in Toronto, Orlando you want to look at?
We can kind of scan it after, but one more thing actually on Minnesota is I think we have to be interested in the under also if SGA doesn't play. Like he's a player where his impact is entirely on one side of the court. And I mean, I have to go by feel here because I'm just pulling up SGA's numbers. He's a 3.2 on offense and a negative 0.8 on defense. So net 4 points towards the offensive side, plus like a pace adjustment probably. Like he's worth a good amount to the total. And then without Towns, we've talked about this. Minnesota games are a lot lower scoring when Gobert is on the court without Towns. So even just like gut feeling about this total, which is what I have to use because I don't have a model for the total, but we're in the 230s. Like that already feels a bit high. But I wouldn't just bet the under based on like that gut feeling. That's not enough for me. But I think if SGA is ruled out, we're looking at game total under. We're also looking at OKC team total under. In addition to betting the Minnesota spread, I think you can combine all those bets together. It's similar, sort of similar to what we had with Halliburton last night when we were talking about him maybe not playing.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So a lot of potential value, a lot of different possible ways to do it if we get SGA news out.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Everybody, if you're monitoring Twitter or you have your own way for keeping an eye on it, that is definitely a strike point. If you see that SGA's out, you can get some money on Minnesota. You can bet the game total under. You can bet the team total for OKC under. So
I'm seeing 231.5 for the game total, and I'm seeing 112.5 for the Thunder team total. I would be interested in under both of those for sure.
Yep.
Gotcha.
I think I'm more interested in the Thunder team total part of it, only because the Thunder side of the game is just inflated according to what we have as the fair number for it. Like we're showing value on Minnesota, which means we almost by definition have to think OKC as a team is overvalued. And then that's just accelerated if we get SGA not playing.
Yeah. We could theoretically use the theoretical spread that Matt's model creates to create, individuals. We could create team totals out of that using the spreads and whatnot. I don't think it would be all that useful, but all that would say is that we would like slightly under on the OKC side is all that Matt's just summarizing that.
Right. We would like it slightly even with SGA in on the team, not the game total part, but the team total part.
The team total.
We'd think it's like a point too high. And then if he gets ruled out, it might be 5 points too high.
Okay.
So, yeah, I guess that's all for that game. Monitoring props there too, but with SGA formally questionable, we're probably not getting anything on that front.
I'd be curious if they post Giddy props though, because I like the ball in his hands. And like to see how that goes.
I think that's probably for questionable players. Sometimes you'll see the players around them, their props pop up, but only later. Like we're not going to get that early.
Yeah, I agree that if we get this SGA news like an hour and a half before tip, you might have some props to play. But if you get it too early, there probably won't be any on the board.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's all for that game, right? We've got some very nuanced and I don't know, games that are going to require some work, but a lot of potential value on that one too.
Love to see it.
All right, are we ready to talk about the return of Mike Conley or the potential return of Mike Conley? Or
I sure hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. Although we haven't projected in, I don't actually think he is likely to play. This is more of a if he plays, we have a ton of value on Utah. I guess in general, I would say a player is probably going to perform a bit worse when he's had a long layoff. Like Bogdan Bogdanovic couldn't hit a shot in the first half. I guess you just get that sometimes. But the benefits
is that causation or correlation?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Let's assume that the causal part of that is there but mild, like it's a very tiny variable.
Sure.
I think it's more than accounted for on the other side by the fact that the Jazz are on a back-to-back, but Conley is not on a back-to-back.
Right.
Conley didn't play last night. And there's no travel here. Utah had a home game last night. He was sitting on the bench. He's got to go, I don't know, like a couple miles home and come back. Like Conley is well rested. So he's got some rust and some rest if he plays. So I would not worry about it. I guess that was what I was kind of saying is there's a benefit to a player coming back on the second leg of a back-to-back because then he becomes the one guy on the team who is not affected by the back-to-back.
Another thing that I'm noticing here, and I'm sure you already thought about this, but the Jazz did blow out the Pacers last night, and it looks like they didn't get a full set of minutes for the starters. So Vanderbilt, Olynyk only got 20 and 21 minutes. Sexton and Clarkson only played 27, 28.
Okay. Hold on.
They got a reasonable amount of rest for a back-to-back.
I was trying to pull up the box score, and then the Burger King ad came up. So
what
whatever.
A worthless business Burger King is.
Yeah, you just read off the minutes, so I don't have to show them, I guess. Because I can't.
I just happened to notice that while you were speaking. So
okay, no. They had like a sort of blowout, but not a full blowout. But they did get a little bit lower minutes on most of the guys, like you said, compared to like it was not the Milwaukee situation.
Right.
So we at least I don't know if I want to add anything to them for that, but
to me it's
not
just
bad.
There might be a little more meat on the bone than what I don't want to adjust anything for that detail, but to me it's just a small plus in that category.
Yeah. No, I think that's true.
All right. Are you betting this one now or are you waiting for Conley confirmation news?
I'm waiting. Let me see, because this is another one where I may, like, if the line starts moving, I may just bet it because of that. The Jazz are -4, but there are books at 4.5. So if all the 4s are about to evaporate, like I might just.
I'm gonna take some 4 now.
I think that's perfectly fine.
Here's my thoughts, and tell me if you're reading this the way that I'm reading it. We're either let's just assume Conley's the only piece of news, right? There may be something that
Josh Hart is listed doubtful. The line could budge a little bit when he's formally ruled out. I don't think he's playing though.
My thoughts are this is either a small bet on Utah or a big bet on Utah.
Yeah.
Almost no matter what.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm probably going to get a half unit in now and then plan to add on if I can react to the Conley news.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And also I think the books are not expecting Conley to play. So if he gets ruled out.
We're never going to find a 3.5 line. I think that's impossible.
we're only getting it if Josh Hart is playing.
Yeah,
Although
okay,
Utah is not a good. What's that?
We're not going to get a 3.5 line that we're going to want to take.
Right, because Josh Hart is worth like over 3 points to the spread for Portland.
Oh wow, that's more than I would.
Because
guess,
Trendon Watford is one of the worst players in the NBA, and that's who starts
Gotcha.
for him. And then Justice Winslow gets extra minutes, and Drew Eubanks
goes downhill real quick.
Portland has no depth, and Shaedon Sharpe had one of the craziest dunks I've ever seen the other night. But he's like, he can't guard anyone yet, and I don't even think he's efficient at all on offense yet. Like, he's a work in progress. He's going to show some highlights, but you don't want him playing extra minutes if your goal is to win right now. He'd be great on the Spurs. So if Josh Hart plays, we probably don't want anything on Utah. Just with him having missed last game and being listed doubtful.
Well, here's what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna take that risk for a half unit, and if I end up with only a 1 point edge on this half unit, I'm going to sleep less well than I could have otherwise. But I'll live with it, I think. But I want to be able to get as much as I can to react to the news here.
Yeah, but so I think that's fair. And then if we find out Conley is upgraded to anything, then we want Utah. Because we have a player who's been out. And if we get Conley seen at shoot-around or whatever, or upgraded to questionable, then we want Utah. Like, that's a huge positive if Conley is upgraded to questionable.
Yeah, if only Utah had a writer like the Hawks do, so we could see if the sneaker is posted, determine who the sneaker is, read the team names on whether that guy's going to play, and then still miss it. But anyway,
do you want to segue into what happened yesterday? Now that we've covered every game, because that was fun.
Let's talk about
we put in so much work yesterday just to get it wrong, and that's not a complaint. That's just how it goes sometimes.
Are you going to feel worse? Are you going to feel worse that I got it right or no?
No, because you put in a little more work than me, so that's just how it goes.
Yeah, I got a little bit lucky, but whatever. Okay, let's just go to the I think we've covered. We've covered every game that we care about.
So Matt's going to give the recap. If you guys want to see the full 4-hour progression, just read Matt's novella length tweets from yesterday. But it was actually it's a very interesting kind of postmortem to go through. But Matt, what? Talk about how things changed, what you were looking at, how this game kept getting some mixed signals, and then what you ended up doing.
Yeah, so I've got a lot of time now to recap what happened yesterday because this USA game is just continuing to be underwhelming. Give me 1 second because I'm logging in again. This is part of the game. Just be logged in case we get the Bucks.
In case news comes.
Yep, or any other team. Okay. So yesterday we did the show and we talked about how the Hawks were going to be a good bet only if they had all of their players available. At the time, the guys listed questionable were Clint Capella and Bogdan Bogdanovic. And then we got an update from, I'm going to have to give this guy a shout out. Let me find his name again because this one Hawks beat writer basically consumed my entire, my Twitter page is now recommending, like all of his tweets are showing up at the top of my feed now because I spent the entire day looking at his stuff. I'm not going to know how to pronounce it, but it's something like Kevin Chouinard, I think, or Shonard, I don't know. But Hawks beat writer, where does he... Yeah, okay. Hawks beat writer. And he posted an update in the afternoon that Bogdan was at shoot-around and Capella was not. So at that point, that's all we had. And it was basically just going to be a no bet because we needed both guys to play to bet on Atlanta. And then a short time after that, Trae Young, who was present at shoot-around, got downgraded to questionable with a shoulder injury. So at that point, I mean, I don't know if we've spent much time on air talking about it because I don't know if there's been a Trae Young questionable game since we started the show, but Trae Young's impact on totals is astronomical. We looked at the numbers from last year. There were 27 less points scored per Hawks game when Trae Young didn't play compared to when he played. My guess on his impact is somewhere... we almost gave up another one. My guess on his impact to the total is somewhere in the 10 to 15 point range of what it should be. We got really lucky last year that the gap was 27, but I think Trae Young is actually worth maybe a dozen points to the total because of his combination of great offense, terrible defense, high pace, and then the lack of all of that in his backups, like
He
defensive
doesn't
minded
quite
guards.
have the DeLon Wright behind him this year to make it even more extreme, but
Yeah, and having DeJounte Murray makes he covers up for a lot of the sins.
yeah, DeJounte can be the one man show. He's a little bit of an
Yeah.
interesting guy.
But
He's a
sense that-
really good defender, though. Is
Yeah,
the main difference.
Right. So even with that, we did talk about it the other day. I can't remember what the player was, but we were saying it's not quite Trae Young impact, but so
that might have been for Halliburton.
Yeah, that was Halliburton,
yeah,
I think.
it was Halliburton. So all right. So now jump back in. So
Okay. Yeah. So
downgrade to questionable.
right, but at the same time, we had Bogdan probably playing and Capella probably not playing. At least what I thought, which are two moves that would push you more towards an over. So we had Trae Young downgraded, which was really good for unders. But I had to then try to weigh, okay, if Capella's out, they're going to have smaller lineups. Bogdan's in, they're going to have a bit more scoring off the bench. So it's not quite as good for Trae Young as it might have been if the circumstances were reversed. So the total at that point was 233. I went with like a 1 unit bet on the under, and it moved to 230, which I thought it was fine. Then we got Jamal Murray downgraded. And that opened the door for, I guess it made the under a little better. I think the total dropped another point. But it also opened the door for, okay, now if Murray is out, we may have some value on Atlanta because the line had started to move more towards Denver. So now we're looking at the spread and the total. The line had started to move more towards the Denver side.
Early in the day, I think the line was only 1.5, and I think at various points it had dipped to 3.5 or 4.5, if I recall correctly.
We had, when we did the show, Denver was -2.5. When Trae got downgraded, it went to Denver -4. When Murray got downgraded, it went to Denver back down to 3.5. So Denver was favored by 3.5 at that point. So we had all of that. We had Bogdan questionable but closer to probable. We had Capella questionable towards doubtful, at least what we thought. And we had Trae. And we had Trae and Jamal Murray both like 50-50. And at that point, the line was Denver -3.5. Total was like 229. Okay.
And all right, so I'm going to step in just real briefly here.
That was our summary for the afternoon.
So, we had done the morning show. We had, I was kind of working on some other stuff in the afternoon, and then like this piece of news, the next piece of news that comes up, I'm going to reveal here in a second. But we had now we had all these moving parts. The Capella, how different Capella and Trae is to the game. And now we're trying to decide, okay, we had to figure out a both in scenario, a both out scenario, and each in scenario without the other. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to figure out all these plays. And then we get this piece of news that the coach says there's only 10 players, but he doesn't tell us which 10 players it's going to be that's going to play.
Yeah.
And that honestly was one of the coolest updates, but also one of the most frustrating updates at the same time, because then Matt and I just spent the next hour trying to figure out which exact 10 players it was. And therefore, you have to make assumptions on certain things. You have to draw conclusions. And then occasionally, sometimes you get it wrong. So,
yeah.
Matt, take it over from here.
So the reason I was able to get this right is because, so we were at Denver -3.5, total 229. We didn't have anything for a while. And I wasn't ready really to make a bet at that point. But when we got that Nate McMillan, the Hawks coach, that update that 10 guys would be in, and we started doing this process of elimination game, okay, the Hawks have 16 players. We already know that Trent Forrest and DeAndre Hunter and John Collins and
there was 4 guys already ruled out formally.
Yeah, I'm missing one there, but there were 4 guys ruled out formally.
Jalen Johnson was still questionable?
Yeah, so we had 4 questionable players out of 12, and we knew 2 were going to play. And the questionable players were Jalen Johnson and Frank Kaminsky. Oh, did the U.S. just score or offsides? What do we think? I think it's a goal.
Oh, yeah, they called it a goal.
Goal!
There we go.
We're going to have to start diverting a little bit of attention now. It's 2-1. Okay. More importantly, though, the Hawks game from yesterday. So at that point, we had 4 questionable players, and we knew 2 were going to be in. But the problem was the questionable players were so different from one another, with Trae Young and Clint Capella having both being guys that would be really good for the Hawks to play, but having exact opposite impacts on the total. And then Jalen Johnson and Frank Kaminsky, who are both bench guys. And if it was Johnson and Kaminsky, it was going to be terrible for the Hawks If it was Trae and Capella, it was going to be great for the Hawks, but you wouldn't want the under then because Trae is playing. So there was all these different combinations that would have, there was basically like 2 distinct bets to make for each combination of those players. And literally what I did, the reason I was able to do well here, is I logged into like 6 different sports books and had in my bet slip on a different site the contingent plan for each scenario. So each sports book, like on FanDuel, I had all my Hawks and overs. On the Win, I had all my Hawks and unders. On Caesars, I had like Denver and under, and on whatever other site.
How many bets did you have queued up?
I can't. It was so many, maybe 100. But okay, so
pray and pray.
So at that point, I thought based on that 10 player update thing, the most likely player, or I didn't care about Frank Kaminsky and Jalen Johnson.
Yeah,
it was basically what's going to happen with Capella, what's going to happen with Trae. And because
I'm gonna add what I did.
Okay.
I had a lack of time, and I felt like we had landed on enough of the right answer that I played a total of, like a third of a unit only. And I split it up between, I played a little bit, 1/6 of a unit on the spread, 3.5, 1/6 of a unit on the over, because I had thought we had landed on Trae was going to play,
right.
Capella was going to be out, and then we were going to split up Kaminsky and Jalen Johnson, and whatever happens.
Yeah, okay. Oh, so there's one more thing to add here, though. There's actually a couple more things relating to Nate McMillan, because I think where you were at actually was reasonable, because the bet I was most, like my finger was the closest to was the over. Yeah. So yeah, I was sort of on the same page. We also heard Nate McMillan say that if Jalen Johnson can't go, Frank Kaminsky will be able to play. Like it kind of sounded like we were only going to get one of those two. And then it became like, are we going to get Trae or Capella? And Capella had missed shoot around. So but
Trae was a late add-on, so like that
it was hard.
Overlooked. I forgot that Trae was a late add-on to this discussion, and I think that adds more merit than I wanted to give it at the time.
Yeah,
but I felt like we put in a lot of work. You a little more than me, of course. And I going into it before the news came, I thought we had a pretty good idea of how it was going to unfold. Sometimes it doesn't work out.
Yeah, well, there's still more here, but go ahead.
For me, keep going.
I was completely disconnected at happy hour, just drinking bourbon, and I swooped in from 50,000 feet and saw the Trae was out, and I'm like, oh, I guess we want the unders, and then I saw some over bets, so I'm like, oh, I guess I'll just swoop back out and see what and pray for the best.
Yeah, and it almost went over that. The total ended up at 226 where the game ended. So it actually was pretty close to like that range where it was. But
I had the over 228. You had talked about some lines that were higher than that. The line that I got the over at was 228. So
I had under at 229 and under at 233.
Well played.
Barely. It got close at the end. Denver had a shot at the end. Denver had a 3-point attempt with like 10 seconds left that would have won your over. That Jamal Murray missed. Anyway. So still before the game, this is not even all of the story yet. The reason we thought Trae Young was more likely to play than Capella is because Capella wasn't at shoot around. Maybe, not perfectly handled by any of us, but that was what we were thinking. But then we got this Hawks beat writer, Kevin Chouinard. He plays this game. We were talking about this off air. He plays this game before Hawks games where he'll take a picture of someone's shoe who's warming up and play like guess the player based on the sneaker. And normally this is just a silly game, but given that we're trying to figure out who's going to play,
we have a huge process of elimination here. I missed this part, so I'm dying to hear where this goes.
Oh my God. Well, the Netherlands just went back up by 2. So that's unfortunate. Okay, so this part, more exciting thing. He tweeted a picture of what looked like a big man's foot. And I was looking at it like, no, that can't be who that is. And then people were responding, is that Clint Capella? And he's like, yes, that's Capella. So at that point, we had Capella warming up. So then I tweeted that because we knew we had a zero-sum game for who was going to play for the Hawks, that because we now have Capella warming up on the court, it's less likely that Trae Young is going to play.
Yeah,
so I started queuing up more under bets than over bets. I still had both. Like I had screens with both things, but I started, diverting my attention more towards the under portion. And then a few minutes after that, the same guy tweeted that Trae hadn't come out for warmups yet. And to me, that was enough that I just hit submit on all my unders because I knew at that point the line was going to start shifting. Like once the player is not on the court, word is going to get out.
Yeah.
And I knew at that point that I could just rebet the over to hedge it if I needed to. So at that point, I submitted every under bet that I could get, within reason, but I took a bunch of unders and then queued up overs in case I needed them as a hedge. And then when Trae was finally ruled out for real, I just, deleted all those. I didn't need the overs anymore. I just stuck it out with the unders. So we kind of got we got tipped off, but very slowly and ambiguously. Like it was the weirdest way to get news I've ever seen. Like there's no way. There's nothing like this.
We were trying to figure. It actually felt like we were doing handicapping like 8 years ago when there was no real news anywhere. There was no good shows. It was all just guys just trying to figure it out through the tea leaves. And it was a fun exercise, but I didn't love the way I played it. I'm glad you did the extra mile there. I'm glad it worked out. Any other thoughts from yesterday?
Yeah, well, thanks again to Kevin. Maybe I'll make a clip of this and tag him so he can see how much work we did
I was
based
just
on
going to
his.
say, I think that if we learned one thing from yesterday, we could always just wait for the shoe tweet and then we're good to go.
Yeah, as a last resort, worst case scenario, we just wait to find out whose shoe is on the court for warmups. I mean, he could have picked any player. He could have picked DeJounte Murray, who we knew was going to play. But he decided to go with Clint Capella, who we didn't even know if he was going to be there or not. Just an amazing combination of things. I don't think this guy realizes how much he helped, honestly, because without knowing that Capella was out there, I mean, for me anyway, I wouldn't have known what to do. So I think he helped us. He helped me a lot by accident. But then, okay, so there's still one more piece of this game.
And then one more, and then
there's one more. The Hawks wound up being a good bet last night. Because the line, every time Trae Young sits, we have the under and we have the Hawks. Because the line will always over account for Trae Young. Because it doesn't realize how bad he is on defense and how he's only worth. I mean, even in the context of this year's team, which isn't as deep as last year's team, especially with John Collins not available, even on the context of this year's team, he's worth like 3.5 or 4 points to the spread. Like he's really, really good. But his offense would put him on like the Steph Curry tier. But given how bad he is on defense, he's still quite important. But we wind up getting value on Atlanta because the line will over adjust for him. And then also just like Atlanta has tended to be a little underrated for the last few weeks, I think. We've had a lot of bets on them. So the Hawks wound up reopening at +6, maybe 5.5, when we had the fair line around 2.5 to 3. So we had like a 1-unit bet on the Hawks after that. And then it wound up closing at like 4.5. We got a bit of closing line value on Atlanta. So the Hawks won. The under came in. I know you guys we almost had it where you hit the over and I hit the under if we had gotten it right at 229. Yeah. We couldn't quite get that. That would have been a perfect game if somehow.
Like I said, I had like less than a quarter unit in this game, but I still, is what it is.
For me, it was a unit on the Hawks and like 3 on the under, so I was happy for sure. But yeah, the game also just. This has been happening where it just works out. Like the Hawks' last 3 games where Trae Young has been downgraded and then formally ruled out later, they beat Denver. Earlier in the season, they blew out Milwaukee without him. And then the previous one was last year where they had a blowout win at home against the Grizzlies without Trae Young. They've just done really well without him. And I think some people would say, oh, it's because Trae Young sucks or whatever. It's certainly not that. It's just, I mean, some of it is just variance and whatever, it's random results. But also, the rest of the Hawks are better than people think. And Clint Capella is almost as important as Trae Young is, especially when you're going up against Jokic. Like you could argue, I think you guys were both kind of saying this yesterday, that in the context where you're playing against Jokic, Capella could be worth like a lot. Like, you really need him.
Like there's so few people that Capella is needed against more than Jokic, I would imagine.
We did not want to see Frank Kaminsky trying to guard him.
No.
That would not have been fun. And Okongwu did okay in his minutes, but Denver also continues to play DeAndre Jordan for some reason, which in the case of yesterday was really good. So I think that's the conclusion of the Atlanta thing from yesterday.
Okay. All right. Any other recaps, or are we anything else to be keeping an eye on, or are we wrapping up?
The Halliburton stuff was mostly off yesterday, right?
Yeah, he played and then we didn't. I think really what happened there is he was being viewed as much closer to probable than doubtful, and the lines also had him basically probable.
The markets were officially priced for that, I think.
The markets were very much shaded towards him being in. So if he had been ruled out, I think we would have had a huge amount of value on the under, specifically is what we talked about.
Right.
Some on the Jazz, but certainly the under.
Gotcha.
Although just an interesting note, like basketball wise from that game, the Pacers, Halliburton left the game in the fourth quarter. They were down 25 with like 10 minutes left. The Pacers ran a full court press for the final 10 minutes of the game. I've never seen anyone do that with a 25-point deficit. They actually scored, like the fourth quarter wound up having, I want to say it was 75 points, if not maybe
38 to 38 was the fourth quarter scoring in that game.
Yeah, the Pacers ran a full court press for like 10 minutes. I mean, I don't know why.
They're tanking, bro.
They're not though. Like we've got them. They're right in there. Yeah. Like I don't know what that was.
Anytime you say why, I'm just gonna say tanking.
Yeah.
Right? Like it doesn't even like
it doesn't make sense.
It's a trump card.
Because the Pacers are still over 500. I don't. And they were already losing. They could have just given up. It was weird. But yeah, I think that covers everything from yesterday. Do we want to talk futures for like 5 minutes? Because we have a couple games tonight that are kind of important for it.
I mean, if you guys are. Good.
Well, I guess the quick thing is Portland is playing Utah, and we are just going to continue to bet on Portland miss playoffs bet, the playoff bets if they lose again. Like, I feel pretty good about this Portland fade right now, especially with the Lakers still winning.
Gotcha. So in terms of what's actionable, we talked about this less than a week ago, and we liked it at plus 140. We talked about it a couple days ago, and the it here is Portland missing the playoffs.
Yep.
So we liked it at plus 140. We liked it 2 days ago at plus 100. So even money. What if they lose tonight? What's the price that you think is still good?
Here we go. Bet365 still is plus 100. I think Bet Rivers has the same.
Mm-hmm.
They're right now. They're well above 50% to not make the playoffs. If they lose tonight, I think we can almost call it 50-50 that they even reached the play-in tournament.
Right.
Because the Lakers, let me pull up the 538 projected standings again. And 538 does not like the Lakers at all. Like, way less than anyone else. And they also are not accounting for the Lakers potentially upgrading a bit via trade. And now we've got... we could almost be at a spot where like the Lakers wind up within a week being projected for more wins than the Blazers.
Mm-hmm. All right, so you like it at plus 100.
Yep.
Would you bet it? Is there a minus odds that you'd still bet tonight if they lose?
Yeah, certainly. Like if they lose tonight, because Utah is another team that they may wind up needing to be ahead of. Because again, we're talking about making the playoffs, which doesn't just mean reaching the top 10. It also means being 7 or 8 compared to 9 or 10, because that would dramatically change the probability of advancing to the playoffs through the play-in tournament. And Utah is definitely a team that we think is very likely to be around the 7 or 8 seed. And for Portland to lose another game to the Jazz, tiebreaker aside, like that'll be part of it, but also just a head-to-head game has twice the impact. It really decreases the likelihood that they will finish the year ahead of Utah. And they just lost a home game to the Clippers without George and Kawhi. So they've been reeling. If they lose to Utah, I think anything short of like minus 200 looks good at that point.
Wow. Okay.
Like right now, I think you can bet it at plus 100. They miss the playoffs. I think if they lose again tonight and the line is minus 130 or 40 or 50, I still like it.
Got it. Okay.
So we've been sort of averaging in, but the information, this keeps moving in our favor because the Blazers have not been winning.
Right. For those of you who have access to Bet Rivers will keep the line up even after the game closes. So if Portland loses, if you have Bet Rivers, I think the last game when it was plus 140, that line was still up an hour after the game ended.
It was still up the next morning. It changed at like 10 a.m. I remember trying to bet it the next morning also.
There you go. So if you have access to Bet Rivers, if they lose tonight, you can probably still get it at plus 100. And we're saying if they lose tonight, you don't have Bet Rivers, but you can find it even in the minus 150, minus 160. You're saying even all the way down to minus 200, you still like it?
Yeah, I'm just checking Bet Rivers to see because they may have actually pulled it. I can't find it on here.
That's all right. It's just more if you have access to it, check it. If you see it on there even while the game's going, it'll still be there when the game's ended.
Yep. Well, also, I mean, you can just bet it at Bet365 now because even if they win, plus 100 is fine. And they also probably won't win tonight. I mean, we have them projected to be 6-point underdogs, even if Mike Conley doesn't play. I think if you're at a site that's going to pull it when the game starts, and we get Mike Conley confirmed in, yes, we talked about like betting on Utah at that point. Betting Portland to miss the playoffs at that point also, I think you can just do it based on the Conley news.
Okay.
I realize how absurd this might seem this early in the season, but the reason I'm being like this granular with it is because this is a bet that's plus EV no matter what right now, like at any reasonable number around what it is. And we're just trying to optimize a bit. But this is good. Like the Blazers missing the playoffs, I think is worth betting kind of in anything resembling what the current line is. And even if they win like 2 games in a row, it just gets better if the situation improves. DraftKings doesn't have this listed right now either though. So,
that's all right. I think we've got the recommendation there.
Yep.
So
and we've been saying it for like 2 weeks already that Portland is a fade for playoff bets. So hopefully people already have it, and we're looking at it on Bet365. So
and then just,
worst case, go there.
This is a concept I was just having a conversation with a friend about. So you've heard us talking about when it was plus 170, it was plus 140, now it's plus 100. Don't feel bad if you missed out on the plus 170 and plus 140. As Matt just detailed, this is still a great bet at plus 100. So we're here. Today is today. You can't go back and make bets that you didn't make, a few days ago or a week ago. This is a solid bet at plus 100. Don't have the FOMO about missing out on something that might have been better. This is a great spot for even more reasons. So if you can get it at that plus 100, like Matt's saying, even down to into minus territory, this is still a solid bet. So something to keep an eye on there. Check your books for the futures on Portland to miss the playoffs. Any other futures beyond Portland that we want to talk about?
Last thing on Portland, Damian Lillard is supposed to return tomorrow. That is mostly accounted for here already. So don't be alarmed when you see, Lillard's back, the bet is ruined. Like it's not. This is mostly accounted for.
Okay.
I think that mostly covers it. We didn't talk about Eastern Conference play-in yesterday. The Pacers have kind of cooled off a bit, and we liked them at plus 700, I think it was, to make the play-in tournament. Now they're like 150, but they've now lost a couple games. We may get to a point where I just want to cash that out for profit. Like the Pacers they could definitely cool off and like just go back to tank mode.
All right, so that's one to keep an eye on.
Yeah,
we'll flag that one to talk at some point here over the next couple days.
Mm-hmm.
All right, anything else for today?
I think that covers it, unless you guys have something.
All right, are we doing a Sunday show or are we off till Monday? What is the call?
I think
we have no soccer to worry about and distract us.
There's a Japan-Croatia game tomorrow. I think let's come back Monday though.
All right, let me rephrase. There's no U.S. soccer to distract us tomorrow.
Yeah, I think let's come back on Monday.
There's U.S. football.
Mm-hmm. U.S. version of football, okay. Yeah, because we've done so well in that sport this year.
Yeah, right.
There's a 3:30 game tomorrow for basketball. Reasonable size slate. I'm open to getting together if you guys are.
I don't know yet. Let's leave it open-ended for now.
Sure.
All right. So keep an eye on the Preaching Sense Twitter feed. You'll see updates about things we talked about earlier. If you have 2 to 3 spare hours, you can read all the tweets from the Atlanta progression of the
4.
game last night. And we will post an update about the status of the show for tomorrow. Enjoy your Saturday. If we don't talk to you tomorrow, enjoy that. And we will see you either tomorrow or Monday here on